Arab billionaire storms out until a black janitor speaks fluent Arabic and makes him freeze. The Crystal Al-Noor Hotel gleamed like a block of crystal under the desert sun. The main conference floor was carpeted thick, the air laced with polished wood and a faint chill of cold metal. Inside the Al-Noor Grand Hall, a billion-dollar negotiation between the British delegation and Gulf energy tycoon Sheikh Zayed Al Fulan was spiraling downward. Ethan Brooks, head of the British side, adjusted his cuff for the 10th time. Interpreter Nolan Pierce wiped his brow. Then it happened. The slip. Financial guarantee became upfront payment in translation. The air pitched like a ship in a sudden headwind. Zaid shot to his feet. His white gutra trembled faintly, gold-rimmed glasses flashing under the chandelier. His voice rolled out in Gulf Arabic, controlled, cold, and razor-sharp. The British didn't fully grasp the words, only the insult in his tone. Zaid turned for the door. The deal teetered on the edge. From a corner, a black woman in a cream housekeeping uniform had been there all along, hands on a mop handle like a balancing staff. Madison Carter, 26, hair pulled back, bare-faced, eyes calm and bright. She set the mop gently against the wall, like placing a witness, and stepped forward half a pace, bowing her head just so. In clear, flawless Arabic, she said, "Forgive me, sir. They are not asking for advance payment. They mean a fair guarantee that honors the partnership." The room froze. Whispering died. Zaid halted in the doorway, eyes locking onto her like a hawk's. He asked, low, "You speak my language?" Madison bowed again, precisely. "I lived in Oman for 8 years." Ethan's mouth fell open. A pen slipped from an aide's fingers. Nolan pushed up his glasses as if to slap himself. For a heartbeat, the old order, where titles, skin color, and job roles decided worth, cracked. But the room's reflex to defend itself snapped back. Claire Reed, designer scarf at her throat, tilted her head, voice loud enough to carry, "Who let the maid in here? Think you're part of the delegation?" Beside her, a man with a hulking watch laughed. "Maybe she's here to clean up our translation mess." Chuckles rippled out. Madison didn't turn. Her shoulders shifted by a breath, signal enough that she'd heard. Still in Arabic, she said softly but clearly, "Intent is the key." The words rolled across the room like a glass bead, coming to rest at the center of the negotiation, meaning above wording. The door slammed open. Paul Hargrove, the slick-haired, bright-tie hotel manager, strode in like a small, sharp blade of authority. He grabbed Madison's sleeve, voice sharp. "What do you think you're doing? You have no right to interfere in negotiations." Madison didn't pull away. She met his eyes and gave the smallest nod, like ending a sentence. Paul's tone hardened. "You're housekeeping. You mop floors. You don't belong in this room." The words "don't belong" hit the floor like an old verdict. A few Brits bent over their phones. Zaid stood still, arms crossed, eyes still on Madison, no rush to judge. Madison left the room. The mop still stood in the corner, silent witness to how job titles get used to crush talent. The service hall smelled faintly of disinfectant and frying oil. Bryce Miller, the burly head chef, swung his ladle like a hammer. "What? The maid thinks she's in charge now?" Laughter burst out. A wet rag flew and slapped the floor near her feet. Madison bent, folded it neatly, set it on her cart. Her gaze didn't flinch, her voice even. "Work doesn't need a title." The laughter died mid-breath. In the lobby, diamonds dotted the guests' clothes. Reagan Hale, in fur, lifted her champagne and spoke loud enough. Was that maid just now trying to be a diplomat? A loud Thai man beside her hollered, "Stick to your mop, honey." Madison paused half a beat, turned her head, eyes steady and cutting. A mop cleans floors. What cleans arrogance? The champagne glass froze mid-air. They looked away from her gaze like from a mirror. She pushed through the revolving door into sunlight. In her apron pocket, the notebook pressed warm and steady like a brick underfoot. Back in the meeting room, Ethan tried to force papers back into order. The air was as sour as lemon. Nolan cleared his throat, trying to restart. Zaid still hadn't left. Silence stretched, heavy. Finally, Zaid's voice landed, low and certain, like driving in a stake. Let her sit. Ethan blinked. Sir? Zaid looked straight at Paul near the door, repeated slower. Let her sit. She will translate. The scrape of a chair across the wooden floor sounded like a new boundary being drawn. Someone went to call her back. Outside, an invisible thread seemed to tug Madison toward the room. She stepped back through the doorway, no apology for her presence, only the precise bow. The mop was still in the corner, bearing witness to a different kind of clean about to begin, one free of prejudice and pride. A chair was added to the table. The sound of wood-meeting floor felt like the signing of a new treaty, a treaty of competence. Madison sat, back straight, notebook open, the corner of the page smoothed flat beneath her finger. Nolan Pierce restated the terms. Madison translated cleanly, precisely, with nuance. Financial guarantee as a risk-sharing mechanism. Respectful partner as a code of conduct that preserved both sides' dignity. The room's breathing began to even out. Zaid al-Fulan listened, giving the faintest nod when Madison preserved the desert tent metaphor he'd just used, that a tent stands firm when its stakes are driven deep into the same piece of ground. Madison rendered it into English without turning it into a joke, keeping its rhythm and weight. Suspicious eyes softened, the negotiating ship stopped rocking. During the break, Claire Reed approached like a velvet-wrapped needle. Her smile curved into a sickle. I bet you think you're special. Truth is, you're out of your depth. Madison set her pen down, slow and deliberate. Depth isn't measured by job title. Claire's smile cracked like crazed porcelain. A few of the Grant Whitman delegates glanced over, then ducked back to their phones like school kids caught cheating. In the next session, a delegate used a phrase that could easily spark national pride. Madison softened it by changing the sentence structure, keeping the meaning but lowering the temperature. In the response, she added a half-beat's explanation for a local idiom, just enough to save face without making anyone feel lectured. Ethan Brooks stopped pressing his lips tight. Zaid leaned back, arms relaxing. When the meeting ended, no one clapped, but the weight of silence said enough. Zaid rose, moved past the delegates, pausing just a moment in front of Madison, his gaze measuring, neither granting favor nor feigning warmth. He nodded, then walked on. The hotel lobby greeted her with the hum of ceiling fans and a barked voice. Paul Hargrove blocked the reception desk, face flushed as if someone had grabbed his throat. Who do you think you are, a floor mop playing interpreter? You've embarrassed this hotel. Madison didn't argue. She reached into her pocket, unpinned her name tag, and set it on the counter with a tiny, decisive click. The sound closed a door, not on her career, but on a structure of contempt. She bowed her head as she had in the meeting room, her courtesy her own, not her job's, and walked away. At the entrance, Tyler Fox, the valet with the crooked grin, tipped his chin. You're the one who spoke Arabic, huh? Feel like a hero now? A low whistle sounded behind him. Madison lifted her head, voice soft but clear. Heroes don't mop floors, but they don't mock the ones who do either. Tyler's grin shrank, his hands sinking deep into his pockets. The whistles cut off like a switch had been thrown. Night fell. At the front desk, a letter sealed with the UAE coat of arms arrived. Paul tore it open, smirking at the thought of an apology for the disruption. The short line inside read like a command. Send her to the penthouse. I need to see her privately. Paul's cheek twitched. He slammed the phone onto the internal line. In the elevator, Monica Hale, the event manager, hugged her checklist to her chest and eyed Madison's uniform. You've caused enough trouble. This hotel doesn't need drama from housekeeping. Madison touched the edge of the notebook in her pocket, her gaze calm. Drama fades, skill doesn't. Monica froze for half a second. Her clipboard slipped a little in her hands. The penthouse door opened to a wash of warm gold light. Sheikh Zaid sat at a glass table, a small box before him. Near the door stood Adam Rahman, a young aide with the habit of checking his watch like a pulse. Please, sit, Zaid said. Madison sat, hands clasped on her lap. Zaid slid the box toward her. Inside was an envelope sealed with the UAE coat of arms. She opened it, hands steady but sure, to find an invitation to join the Language Advisory Council at the Abu Dhabi Energy Summit. Zaid looked directly at her, his voice deep and precise, as though weighing each word. You don't just translate. You understand intent, something many advisors lack even after 10 years. From the corner, Adam gave a half smile in Arabic. Don't get cocky. You just hit the jackpot. You're still just help. Madison closed the envelope, lifted her gaze, sharp as a needle, but without malice. Help builds empires. What have you built? Adam froze, fingers still at the edge of his watch. Madison bowed to Zaid, a light dip like a final signature, then rose. The penthouse door closed behind her, thick carpet swallowing the sound. In the elevator down, she tucked the invitation between the notebook's pages, not to flaunt, but to place it exactly where it belonged, among her notes on phonetics, dialects, and how to save a room's dignity. In the lobby, Ava Lynn, the bun-haired concierge, looked up just in time to see Madison pass. Ava wanted to say, I saw you work extra shifts all month without complaint, but silence was a survival skill in places where petty power could cost you your job. Madison smiled at her, a smile that asked for no validation. Outside, Dubai's night was a sheet of glass, reflecting everything but true weight. Madison drew a deep breath, hand resting on her notebook's cover. On the first page, she wrote in pencil a line for the morning, Where there is language, there is value. Then she closed the book. Tomorrow would bring the next test, before the media, before the rumors, and before herself. But tonight, her silence already carried weight, because it was built on respect, precision, and the unshakable dignity of a black woman who had just stepped through a door others thought she didn't belong in. In the early morning, Abu Dhabi was like a mirror fogged with breath. Madison Carter walked into the conference center in an unbranded black dress, hair tied low, flats made for a long day. The crowd shifted like a tide. Microphones stood tall like a forest of masts. She wore the guest badge of the Language Advisory Council, a thin card that carried a different kind of weight, the weight of responsibility. As she set her notebook down, Rebecca Stone, a reporter with red lips and eyes sharp as a blade, approached. You're the lucky maid? Rebecca smiled, asking as if she'd already drafted the headline, Maid got lucky. How did you conquer your way here? In public, the word conquer glittered with mockery. Madison didn't flinch. She rested her palm on the notebook cover, steadying her breath. Grace doesn't speak languages. Work does. Rebecca's smile faltered for a beat. Cameras around them lowered by half an inch. A few people scribbled quickly. Work, not charm. The interpreter prep room was as tight as an engine bay. White lights shone down on confident faces, sharp ties, strong cologne. A man in a gray suit, Carter Briggs, leaned back and let out a skip the line. I hear you cut the line. From housekeeping to this table, a golden ticket. Then laughter spread. Madison didn't respond. She opened her notes on Hijazi and Gulf Arabic dialects, the E, Q, G, shifts, stress falling on the last syllable, how Gulf speakers use metaphors of tents, water wells, and deserts to talk about commitment and trust. She underlined the tricky terms: off-take agreement, capacity allocation, backstop instrument, and jotted phrasing that would preserve dignity while softening obligation clauses. The technical document trial began. One section described a price corridor and voluntary pause rather than moratorium, a legal weight difference like one rung in a pressure ladder. Madison rendered it smoothly, keeping rhythm but marked it clearly as voluntary, not binding. The room eased. Carter Briggs's smile thinned. Another interpreter, Leah Donovan, tilted her head slightly, noting how Madison timed her pauses for the speaker. No interruptions, no embellishments. By midday came the open press briefing. The podium reached half her height. Madison opened in classical Arabic, weaving two Hijazi proverbs like fastening buttons. A tent stands firm when its stakes share the same ground. A word stands firm when its intent shares the same weight. A silver-bearded professor, Hassan al-Mari, rose among the reporters, eyes glistening. I did not think I'd hear this classical cadence again from an American. The applause was full and round. That afternoon's headline shifted from maid to Gulf language expert. Still, other fires burned from afar. In Dubai, at the Crystal Alnor, Tara Collins at the reception desk joked on break. She's not that pretty, must have caught the Sheikh's eye. A tabloid flicked up a piece, a wink that changed her life at a Dubai hotel. Madison's phone buzzed nonstop, old acquaintances suddenly appearing. Wow, just luck. Look, the internet's talking about you. Madison switched off notifications, deleted 3 apps. She chose her audience again: text, people, and respect. That evening, on a short flight back to Dubai to retrieve a forgotten file, an Egyptian boy chattered across the aisle. Madison leaned over, spoke a few lines of classical Arabic. The boy burst into laughter, his mother's face softening as she whispered thanks. A flight attendant, Chloe Hart, glanced at the notebook on Madison's lap and hissed under her breath. Even on the plane you have to study? Must feel important now. A few passengers looked up, the kind of invisible policing that hangs a mandatory humility tag on black women. Madison closed the notebook, lifted her head. Learning doesn't stop. Chloe bit her lip and turned away, her steps shortening. The next morning, in the internal meeting before ministerial-level negotiations, a young diplomat with a dangling badge, Elliot Crane, leaned in. I've heard about you. You're here for the photo ops, right? Madison set her papers precisely at the table's edge. Photos fade, words remain. Elliot froze for half a second, his hand drifting to his badge as if it suddenly weighed too much. When answering a group of volunteer interns, Madison pointed to the 3 principles written on the notebook's first page. 1. Respect first, persuade later. 2. Intent outweighs words. Find what the speaker is avoiding. 3. Saving face is the cheapest cost for a lasting deal. By afternoon, an email from the OPEC Secretariat confirmed Madison would serve as lead interpreting coordinator for the opening day's plenary. Ethan Brooks from the British delegation passed by with a flat, brief handshake, avoiding her eyes but without the pasted-on smile. Zaid al-Fulan arrived a moment later, giving a small nod. In that moment, Madison understood. Trust didn't need performance. It lived in the nod and in the silence. The night before the session, Madison marked a few more notes. Concession, allowance, binding, non-binding, price floor is not price band, avoid moratorium for pause. At the bottom, she wrote, clean starts with respect. It was once meant for a mop. Tomorrow, it would be for the room. She switched off the light. The air conditioner's steady hum was like a lullaby. Outside, the city's signs glittered. Inside, the notebook closed. Her lightest weapon. Tomorrow, she would see how precision could turn the course of an entire river. The OPEC main hall was as vast as an orchestra pit. The flags of member states arched overhead, light pouring down onto a round table polished to a mirror's sheen. Madison sat at the operational center, green mic light on, notebook open, pen laid neatly along the page's spine. Zaid al-Fulan entered, face composed. Across from him, Ethan Brooks kept his folded note sheet in front of him. The opening speech began with a metaphor. The well runs dry, the wind rises. Translated literally, it would sound like cheap drama. Madison kept the imagery but added a half-beat to frame it as changing conditions, sidestepping blame. One delegate proposed a price floor. The opposing delegate wanted a price band for flexibility. Madison aligned the terminology, emphasizing the auto-adjustment mechanism in her tone so each side could feel they'd saved face. When the term voluntary pause came up, one delegate slipped and said moratorium. One word, and the legal weight jumped. Madison immediately anchored it back. A voluntary pause, not legally binding, guiding everyone back on track. Zaid glanced at her, gave the faintest nod. Ethan's shoulders eased. In the back row, a few highlighters changed color. During the break, a reporter thrust a mic toward her. How does a hotel maid climb up to here? Dozens of phones lifted like a bank of eyes. Madison stood tall, voice calm. I've never considered that job beneath me. Where there is language, there is value. A brief pause. Someone lowered their camera. It wasn't the headline grabber they wanted, but it laid a brick. That afternoon came the sensitive bargaining. A senior official used the word concession. Translated directly, it risked sounding like capitulation. Madison slid it to arrangement with a qualifying condition, turning a blow into a shared footing. When backstop instrument arose, she kept the technical term, but added a short gloss. A risk hedging tool, not a payout guarantee. That half-tone difference kept the room's voice from cracking. At the closing dinner, the dessert table glittered like a beach of crystal goblets. Grant Whitman, a senior British executive, approached with a thin smile. You did well, but don't think. This is a fairy tale, and fairy tales end. Madison set down her plate, met his eyes. Fairy tales end. Work doesn't. Grant froze for a heartbeat. Conversations nearby skipped a beat, then shifted away like water settling after a stone is thrown. The next morning, Reuters ran a bold headline. Sheikh Zaid al-Fulan. Madison Carter is my senior advisor, and the reason I'm investing $2 billion in the U.S. The next line read, she understands what others miss. That's worth more than money. Madison's inbox flooded. Investment funds, think tanks, universities inviting her to speak, consult, collaborate. At the Crystal Al-Noor in Dubai, concierge Ava Lynn saw the article on her small screen, touched Madison's name, as if it were the confirmation she hadn't dared voice the other day. In Dubai, Paul Hargrove was summoned to a windowless meeting room. By afternoon, someone else sat in his chair without announcement. Tara Collins suddenly found her name trending after a guest she'd once spoken to repeated her words online. A local fashion brand pulled its sponsorship. Ethan Brooks received notice of losing a bid. Dubai's mistranslation incident cited in an independent review. No one mentioned Madison directly. Truth didn't need a tag. In the hallway, Adam Rahman walked beside her, the half-smile gone. "How do you not break under all that noise?" Madison brushed her fingertips over the notebook cover. "I leave the noise outside. In here, there's only the work." Adam nodded, this time a student's nod. When the cameras were gone, Madison sat alone in a corner, summarizing the session in her notebook, the borderline meanings, the words to avoid, the metaphors to keep. She added one line for herself and for those who never got to stand in the spotlight. "Saving face is the cheapest cost of reconciliation." Beside it, she drew a tiny mop, fine lines, as her private mark. Once, that mop had cleaned floors. Today, it cleaned arrogance. Night settled like a soft cloth. Outside, the city shone. Inside, the silence had weight. She didn't need to throw the window open and shout. She simply turned to the next page. Because no matter how big today's headline, tomorrow would bring a new text, new people, new intent to set in the right place. And that was the work. The work never ends. Reuters broke the story like a lightning strike. "Sheikh Zayed Al Fulan, Madison Carter is my senior advisor, and the reason I'm investing $2 billion in the U.S. In less than an hour, Madison's inbox flooded with invitations: Grey Rock Capital, the Gulf Arabic Language Institute, the Kennedy School in Boston, several energy conglomerates. The subject lines varied, but the message was the same. "Can we meet you?" Madison smiled faintly, not in contempt, but because she knew the meeting was just the shell. The work inside was the core. At the Crystal Alnor, Ava Lynn quietly set a teacup down at the counter, eyes on the newsfeed. She remembered the night Paul Hargrove growled into his phone, remembered Madison's name tag landing with a sharp clack on the wooden desk. Ava typed a short line, "Proud of you," then deleted it. Typed it again, deleted again. She knew late praise sometimes felt like an unfinished apology. Tyler Fox caught Madison by the valet entrance. The crooked grin was gone. He scratched his head, his other hand fumbling. I'm sorry for being rude." Madison nodded, a quiet stitch in the air. "Thank you for saying so." No lecture, no performance. The seam was just enough for both to move forward. By noon, Grant Whitman, senior British executive, had arranged to meet Madison in the lounge. Light reflected in silver streaks across the table. Grant opened his briefcase, slid over a contract, an offer to serve as language consultant on a new negotiation package with generous pay. One small clause: all media statements drafted by his side. Credit for her work to be listed under the language team. No individual name. Madison turned the page, underlined 2 lines with her pencil. "I have 3 conditions," she said, voice level as the tabletop. 1. Transparent credit. State clearly, lead interpreter, Madison Carter. 2. Veto rights on any wording that could compromise dignity. 3. Public release of the language protocol for preserving face on both sides. Grant gave a thin smile. "You know people don't do that." Madison closed the folder. "Then we don't work together." Leaving the lounge, she crossed paths with Carter Briggs. The gray-suited interpreter who'd once sneered skipped the line. Leaning against a column, he smirked. "Still walking a tightrope, Carter? Fall's gonna hurt." Madison didn't stop, answered as she passed, "I build the bridge before I walk it." Briggs's tongue caught. Those who live by twisting words can't stand a line that lands clean. That afternoon, the summit organizers invited Madison to review the press guidelines for journalists. She opened her notebook and drafted 3 rules to sit at the top. 1. Put intent before words. Ask the spokesperson what they need to protect in national dignity. 2. Avoid legal terms with excess weight, moratorium, binding, etc., when a voluntary frame is enough. 3. Keep the pause beat, a half breath after sensitive statements to give the listener a chance to recover face. When the media team read them aloud, Rebecca Stone, the red-lipped reporter, raised her hand. "Is there room for headline material?" Madison looked up, calm. "Cheap headlines make tomorrow's text cheaper, too." Someone in the back chuckled. Rebecca smirked, then scribbled, "Pause, beat, Ihakos, respect." That evening, Madison called Aunt May, her foster aunt in Ohio. In the background, the ting of the oven, the scrape of a bread knife. Cousin Jenna's voice came steady. "Heard you hit the jackpot. Don't get cocky." Uncle Roy, cap pulled low, added, "Just luck, right? Don't go thinking this means—" Madison smiled, no bite in it. "Yes, I'll still wash dishes when I'm home." They laughed a single, "yeah," half believing. The call ended with the familiar family guardrails. "Don't get ahead of yourself." She set the phone down, eyes on her open notebook. The day's page read, "Intent outweighs words, even those from people you love." The next morning, Monica Hale, the event manager who had once glared at her in the elevator, emailed, "For security, you need to change your access badge." When Madison arrived at the desk, Monica kept her there 10 extra minutes, leafing through protocols to stretch the wait. Madison stood straight, took a deep breath, and said just loud enough, "We could use this time to review the evacuation plan, if a mistranslation heats the room." Monica blinked. She was used to the small power of tripping people up with procedures, never having considered that expertise could redirect the thorn in her throat. At midday, Adam Rahman brought Madison a stack of minutes. No more half smiles. His tone was earnest. "Zaid wants you to check the price corridor section. If it's mistranslated, the press will blow it up." Madison flipped quickly, pointed to the likely pitfall. "Anchor corridor to trigger. Avoid anyone inferring a floor." Adam nodded, eyes lighting like he'd just learned a life-saving trick. News flashed outside. In the U.S., a TV commentator asked, "Is this just a fairy tale spun for the media?" In Dubai, receptionist Tara Collins was tagged in a post quoting her snide remark. Fashion sponsors pulled out. Paul Hargrove quietly vacated his chair. Ethan Brooks received a consulting firm's critique, citing his team's lack of quality control in the Dubai incident. No one named Madison, but the field around her shifted like metal under a magnet. That night, Madison sat by the glass, the city sparkling like stars within reach. She wrote another line. "When they call you a fairy tale, hand them tomorrow's work schedule." Then she closed the notebook. Tomorrow's schedule was heavy as a drum, the opening day interpreting coordination. Beside it, Madison placed a small metal mop, Ava's secret gift tucked into her luggage, to remember that some things shine just by being done right. She touched it, bowed her head slightly, a private ritual for labor. The door to tomorrow was already ajar. Praise and criticism were just sea wind. She would simply walk straight into the work. On opening morning, the organizers staged a public panel on interpreting in energy negotiations, essentially an exam in broad daylight. Moderator Dean Walters gave a brief introduction. We'll witness how intent becomes language without dropping national dignity. The guest seats held Madison Carter, Carter Briggs, Leah Donovan, and Professor Lena Haddad, a scholar of Arabic rhetoric. Dean projected a classical Arabic passage with 2 layers of meaning: praise disguised as criticism, criticism wrapped as praise. A skilled well-digger knows to stop before striking salt. Briggs smirked. It was a diglossia trap. Classical, so it was colloquial. He translated literally, emphasizing salt as failure. The room murmured. The sting was exposed, face lost. Dean turned to Madison. She added a half-beat, then said, "A skilled digger knows to stop before the brine, so the water stays sweet." Both the technical warning and the strategic wisdom remained, without humiliating anyone. Professor Haddad nodded, kept the music, changed the tempo. The second test was a legal term. Voluntary pause, in a context where the media had overused moratorium. Briggs leaned into his mic. I'd call it a controlled halt. Controlled sounded rigid, pulling in legal weight. Dean frowned. Madison lifted her mic, set down 3 stepping stones. 1, pause. 2, voluntary. 3, not legally binding. She fused them into a short, balanced sentence. The message hit center, hard for the press to spin. In the back row, heads dipped to take notes. Then came a modern metaphor. Build a bridge before you cross. Briggs, unable to resist, glanced at Madison and said, "Build a bridge before you cross." Sometimes people who cut the line need to hear that. The phrase "cut the line" hung in the air like a polished knife. Madison didn't look at Briggs. She looked at the room. Bridge building is collective labor. No one cuts the line if they've been carrying bricks every day. The words traveled over the mics and landed square in the hearts of those who'd been underestimated. Leah Donovan's grip on her pen tightened. She gave a small nod. Dean moved to a scenario. A delegation delivers a blunt statement that costs the other side face. The air goes tight as a bowstring. What do you do in the first 30 seconds? Madison opened her notebook, not for show, but to set her center. I give the room a breath. Then I keep the strong image from the statement. Say, let's keep the tent standing, and strip out the strong winds from personal blame. I return face to everyone so they can go on. Dean asked, and if the press accuses you of softening the truth? Madison, truth has layers. I soften the words to keep the intent firm. At the close, Professor Lena Haddad summed up. Interpreting is not copy-paste. It's the craft of saving face, the cheapest, most precious capital. Miss Carter has an uncommon ear for intent. The room applauded. Briggs shrank into his seat, smile gone. Immediately after, the OPEC Secretariat sent an internal notice. Madison Carter appointed late interpreter for the next OPEC session. Leah hugged her, whispered, You've opened the door for a lot of us. Madison smiled. You pushed it yourself. I just kept it from slamming. That afternoon, the British side requested a closed meeting to lock language for the joint communiqué. Ethan Brooks arrived, his smile less strained. We'll go with the voluntary, non-binding structure, exactly as you suggested. Madison nodded, and add a closing line on respecting policy sovereignty. Ethan looked at her, truly looked for the first time. Thanks for saving our face that day. Madison, I saved the dialogue. Everyone keeps their own face. Ethan paused, then nodded, the second student of the day. By day's end, Adam Rahman approached, holding a small bag. I apologize for what I said in the penthouse. He offered a fountain pen engraved with the Arabic word Naya, intent. Zaid asked me to choose a gift. I chose this word. Madison lifted the pen, bowed her head slightly. Thank you. She knew intent was what she'd been chasing from the start, the intent in words, behind words, beyond words. That night, the headline shifted. No "made" in the title anymore. The commentary was mixed. Online, a mocking hashtag flared up, then fizzled like a firecracker. Madison set her phone down, opened her notebook, and wrote 3 lines. 1. Intent outweighs words. 2. Saving face is the cheapest cost of reconciliation. 3. Skill needs no title. She closed the notebook, placed it beside the small metal mop. In the corner, her suitcase lay open. Tomorrow she'd fly to Ohio for a short visit with Aunt May, Uncle Roy, and Jenna, crossing another border of language, the language of family. There, she would interpret between pride and doubt, between self-respect and love. As in every negotiation on earth, intent would still outweigh words. And she was ready. The plane descended over the brown-tiled rooftops of Riverside, Ohio. No silver desert shimmer now, just rows of maples and high school football fields. Madison Carter pulled her suitcase off the carousel, her notebook tucked in her bag beside the small metal mop Ava Lynn had sent. At the exit security checkpoint, an officer glanced at her passport, then at the UAE-crested invitation card. Well, that's fancy, he half joked, half probed. Madison smiled. It's work. The answer cleared the path. She'd learned to set the intent before letting the words drift off course. On the ride home, Aunt May opened the door, the scent of butter and cinnamon spilling onto the porch. Come in, honey, she said. The waffles are almost ready. Cousin Jenna sat at the table, chin in hand, fingernails tapping against the wood. Uncle Roy pulled the bill of his baseball cap low, the TV on mute. Plates of waffles, glasses of milk, and soon the talk slid to the main topics. Reuters, OPEC, $2 billion. Jenna pursed her lips. You really got lucky. People need a story like yours. The word story stretched like gum stuck under a chair. Madison smiled, not arguing. She looked down at her notebook, made a margin note. Intent outweighs words, even those from family. Uncle Roy cleared his throat. In this town, folks work with their hands all their lives. Don't forget the mop that started your story. Madison nodded. I haven't forgotten. I just call it by its real name, discipline. The back door creaked open and shut. Mrs. Barakat, the Yemeni neighbor, rushed in clutching a prescription slip. May, I don't understand. How to take this medicine? The hospital called, said the dosage changed. The slip mixed printed English with slanted handwriting. On the other end of the phone was a nurse speaking fast. Aunt May looked at Madison. Madison gestured reassurance, dialed back, then switched to Arabic. Her voice lowered, clear and slow. Please explain the new dosage and timing for her. She speaks Yemeni Arabic. I'll relay it back. The voice on the other end softened, the pace slowed. Madison repeated it in simple Arabic, confirmed the hours, read the side effects. Mrs. Barakat clasped her hand, eyes damp. Allah yehfazik, may God protect you. Jenna fell silent. Uncle Roy muted the TV. In that moment, language stepped out of the bright news headlines to save the dignity of a real person. In the afternoon, Madison stopped by Riverside High, her old school. The hallways smelled of varnish. Mr. Dalton, her former English teacher, greeted her with a broad smile. The whole school's proud of you. But when she spoke to a group of students, a boy in the back raised his hand. Do you think affirmative action helped you cut the line? The question wasn't sharp, but the undertone weighed her place on the scale. Madison didn't dodge. Thanks for asking. No one cuts the line if they carry bricks every day. I had a mop and a notebook. Both were tools of the trade. The room quieted. Mr. Dalton nodded, seeing her not as a successful alumna, but as a fellow professional. After the talk, Madison stopped by the supply room, where two custodians, Mr. Harris and Ms. Gomez, were finishing up. "I came to say thank you," she said, "for giving me the key to the music room back then so I could practice pronunciation after hours." Ms. Gomez laughed. "Thought you'd forgotten." Madison set the small metal mop beside the floor buffer. "For the memory corner, so the kids know this job shines too." Mr. Harris looked at the small gleaming piece, his nod slow and deep. That evening, Madison accepted an invitation to speak at Riverside Community College. The meeting room was small, folding chairs creaking. During Q&A, a middle-aged man asked a bit tartly, "You started in housekeeping but speak classical Arabic. How'd you learn?" Madison dipped her head. "In Oman for 8 years, and in a supply closet every night writing down every sentence, every vowel shift into this notebook." She held it up, pages worn at the edges, ink bleeding past the margins. Skill doesn't need a title, it needs time. On the drive back, Jenna at the wheel, the streetlight slid past like punctuation marks. "I'm sorry," Jenna said quietly. "Maybe I was jealous. You got out of here and I didn't. But what you did for Mrs. Barakat, that put things in place." Madison rested a hand on the seat back. "No one stays in one place. You interpret every day, between mother and child, between paycheck and bills. It's just another language." Jenna smiled, eyes bright with tears that didn't fall. That night, Madison sat at the kitchen table and wrote 3 lines in her notebook. 1. Family has its own metaphors and pride points, needs a pause beat. 2. Truth has layers, the layer of love and the layer of learned bias. 3. A bow isn't only for a sheikh, it's for the custodian, the neighbor, the family member. She closed the notebook. In the kitchen corner, the small metal mop caught the overhead light like a bright period. Tomorrow, she'd fly back to the UAE. Before bed, Madison texted Ava Lynn, "I'm bringing it with me. Remind me where I started." Outside, the maple leaves rustled in the wind. Inside, the fridge hummed. The family's language had passed through a night's quiet translation. Tomorrow, she would return to the language of the conference room, where intent outweighed words, and respect was the first step on the ladder. Back in Dubai, Madison's work schedule was as thick as the spine of her notebook. Event manager Monica Hale sent an urgent email. Her badge needed replacing due to a security upgrade. When Madison arrived at the credential desk, Monica dragged the process out for 12 extra minutes, flipping a trivial form back and forth. Madison waited long enough to count her breaths, then said quietly, "We could use this time to refine a media exit plan. If a headline misuses the word moratorium, how do we respond in the first 2 hours?" Monica blinked, then suddenly sat up straight, pulling her screen toward them. "Could you draft me a 3-step framework?" A small power had just been redirected. At noon, the UK team invited her to a pre-press conference meeting. Grant Whitman was there, along with Ethan Brooks and Claire Reed. Grant laid a pre-written media brief in front of Madison, thick with framing phrases like fairy tale, from housekeeping to the boardroom. At the bottom, italicized, responses prepared by the UK communications team. Madison looked up. "I have 3 conditions." She repeated her familiar structure, each point landing like a drumbeat. 1. Strike the phrase fairy tale. 2. Credit, clearly, lead interpreter, Madison Carter. 3. Veto rights on any wording that undermines dignity. Grant's smile thinned. "You know the press needs a story." The press needs accuracy. If they want a story, they can write their own. Ethan glanced at Grant. I suggest we follow Madison. We've already paid once for a wrong word. Claire pursed her lips, but said nothing. That afternoon, an unscheduled, closed-door meeting appeared. A U.S. corporation wanted to discuss an off-take agreement. The small room was paneled in wood. At the head of the table, Sheikh Zaid listened. The U.S. side had hired Carter Briggs to interpret. Briggs cleared his throat, trying to look composed. The first phrase was already a trap. The U.S. rep said, "voluntary pause within the price corridor." Briggs, out of habit, blurted, "moratorium and price floor." The two heavy terms hit the table like lead. The air caught. Madison twirled her pen, waited a half beat, the respect pause, then said evenly, "To avoid misunderstanding, the intent here is a voluntary pause, not legally binding, and a flexible price corridor, not a floor." She turned to Briggs, giving a small nod. No humiliation, just putting the train back on its track. Briggs flushed. "You're not in the lead seat here." Zaid tapped his finger on the table once, the sound enough to replace a sentence. "Let her finish." Briggs fell silent. The U.S. delegate exhaled, nodding. "Thank you for preserving our intent." The view in the room shifted. During the break, Claire Reed swept in with a tabloid reporter. "Madison, quick question. How did you charm the sheikh into picking you?" Camera shutters snapped. Madison turned fully toward them, placing a beat before replying, "Language doesn't follow charm, it follows discipline." She paused exactly half a second, the respect pause, then added, "If you need a story, write about the cleaning crew that keeps this place running every night." Lenses lowered. Her answer gave them no bait for a cheap headline. That evening, Adam Rahman knocked on Madison's office door with a draft in hand. Zaid wants a response framework for the closing press conference. Madison spread the paper out and wrote a one-page respect-first code. Intent before words. Ask what the other side wants to preserve. No excess weight. Avoid hard legal terms for soft ideas. Preserve face. Always end with a line that restores dignity. Pause, beat. After sensitive points, wait half a beat to prevent chain reactions. Transparent credit, make individual roles public, respect the work. Adam read it, smiling. This should hang outside the press room. Madison added a last line. A mop cleans floors, respect cleans rooms. Adam nodded. Hang that too. The next day, the press room was as crowded as a rush-hour train car. Grant Whitman started to step up, but Ethan Brooks cut in. "Ms. Carter will lead the terminology briefing." Grant stiffened. Madison stepped forward, not with a speech but with a frame. "Today, we will use 3 consistent terms. Voluntary pause, price corridor, not legally binding. Please avoid alternative heavy terms." She looked around the room, a faint smile on her lips. "We're preserving the intent of one big room, the world." Light laughter rippled, the tension eased. At the end, a male reporter stood, mic raised like a flag. "Some say you're a symbol, a token. What do you say?" The room rustled like a crosswind. Madison rested her hand on her notebook, feeling its worn cover. "I know that word, but my schedule is as thick as this book. I could read it to you, hour by hour of interpreting, of line edits, of pause beats. A token couldn't fill a single page of minutes. Work can." A beat of silence, then pens scratched furiously. Late that night, Monica Hale sent a photo. The Respect First code posted on the press room door, with a small silver mop hanging beneath it. Likely Adam's idea. Madison chuckled quietly. An ordinary object had become a marker, not for glory, but but to remember where she'd started. On her way back to her room, Madison met Briggs in the empty hallway. He stood leaning against the wall, meeting her eyes for the first time. "I was wrong. I thought you'd cut the line, but this morning, you saved my face." "We're all still learning," Madison said. Briggs nodded, exhaling. "Thank you." The elevator doors closed. In the brief reflection, Madison saw herself holding her notebook. Tomorrow would be the final session before Zaid announced the next steps. She pulled out her phone, sent Aunt May a photo of the Respect First code wall. The reply came instantly, "Proud of you. Don't forget dinner." Madison smiled. Respect really did clean a room, even the one inside yourself, and tomorrow she would keep the intent for an even bigger one. On the final morning of the session, the Dubai sky was an inky blue. The press room was as packed as a rush-hour train car. On the wall screen, a news aggregator splashed the headline, "OPEC considers moratorium." The word dropped into the room like a stone. Public reaction tilting sharply. Monica Hale rushed over, face pale. "It's climbing to the top." Madison Carter set her hand on the cover of her notebook, voice low and steady. "Activate the 2-hour plan." The short sentence flipped the switch. The 2-hour plan, drawn up by Madison and Monica the night before, rolled into motion. Step 1. Send unified terminology to all spokespeople. Voluntary pause, price corridor, not legally binding. Step 2. Hold an 8-minute micro-briefing with key reporters, reading out sample replacement headlines. Step 3. A 40-word excerpt from 3 delegation heads confirming no moratorium. Madison enforced a half-beat pause before each sensitive clause. Monica ticked off names as heads nodded. Adam Rahman carried the Respect First code, tapping the line, "Avoid excess weight" like a talisman. In the corridor, Claire Reed appeared with a tabloid reporter, firing a grease-tipped arrow. "Admit it, moratorium was discussed. You just swapped the word." Madison paused, a Respect beat, then answered, "We discussed a voluntary pause, not legally binding, inside a flexible price corridor. If you need a keyword, use those 3. The camera hand faltered. Those words gave no bait for a cheap headline. The final negotiating round began. At the table, a U.S. delegate slipped dangerously close to saying, "Floor." Carter Briggs, the same man who once sneered, "Skip the line," jumped in. "He means corridor, not floor." Madison gave him a slight nod, then set the track for the next sentence. Leah Donovan tilted her pen, marking a pause in the margin. Ethan Brooks exchanged a glance with Madison, then spoke into the mic. "We confirm the term voluntary pause, not legally binding." A room full of small nods. The intent was fixed. The words wouldn't drift. At 11 a.m., the closing press conference. Grant Whitman stepped forward to frame the story. Ethan stopped him, lowering his voice. "Let Madison open the terminology segment. We don't repeat past mistakes." Grant's lips thinned. Madison took the podium, not with a speech but with a frame. "Today, the only 3 phrases you will hear repeated are voluntary pause, price corridor, not legally binding. Please avoid other heavy terms." The whole room wrote like machines. The Respect First code appeared on the big screen, a small mop icon in the corner. A mop cleans floors. Respect cleans rooms. A male reporter stood, neck craning like an antenna. "Aren't you just a symbol, window dressing for a diversity narrative?" The room stirred. Madison placed her hand on the fountain pen engraved Nia, intent Adam had given her. "If you want to measure me by the meeting minutes. Every clause I trimmed, every legal weight I lifted, every pause I placed. Photos will age, the minutes remain. Cameras dropped, pens took over. A side door opened. Sheikh Zaid al-Fulan entered unannounced. The murmurs flattened into silence. He didn't circle the point. Today, I confirm, Madison Carter is my senior language advisor. She helps us hold the intent when the words want to run. He stopped for a half beat, the same respect pause Madison always taught, then continued. I stand by my $2 billion investment. Fingers hammered keyboards. Shutters burst like rain. Grant stood frozen like an unfinished statue. Ethan shook Madison's hand, this time looking her in the eye. Claire turned away into the shadows of the camera banks. Carter Briggs stepped up, murmured, "Thanks for this morning." Madison nodded, silence carrying its own weight. As the crowd thinned, Monica handed Madison an envelope, an invitation to speak at a media ethics conference. Topic: Intent outweighs words. Ava Lynn texted a photo of the Respect First code taped to the press room door, with a silver mop hanging from a red thread beneath. To remember the starting point. Tyler Fox sent a short message. I've apologized to a few people for those old jokes. Thank you. In the afternoon, Madison walked into the staff area, opened an old locker. Hanging there was a well-washed apron, its border thread faded. She folded it neatly into her bag. Paul Hargrove was gone. A new manager greeted everyone with a steady nod. Tara Collins avoided Madison's gaze as she passed, her phone still buzzing with notifications from a guest's account of her sarcasm. Madison said nothing, not from pride, but because some lessons can only be learned in silence. Before leaving, Madison stopped at the far hall restroom. On the shelf stood a new mop, steel handle gleaming. She touched it, bowed her head slightly, a private ritual for labor. When she looked up, she met the eyes of a young staffer, Naomi Price, new on the job, brown-skinned, bright-eyed. Naomi whispered, "Are you Madison? I'm learning Arabic on an app." Madison smiled. "When your shift ends, I'll show you the pause beat. First, learn to name the other person's intent." That evening, at a temporary desk, Madison signed a copy of the Respect First code with the Nia pen, adding a handwritten line. Clean starts with respect. She sent it to the organizers and 3 major news outlets. Closing her notebook, she listened to the city breathing through the glass. A long day. A wave successfully steered, and silence, built from discipline, settled over her like a thin blanket. Tomorrow, she would launch a small scholarship for hotel staff who wanted to study foreign languages. The name was already chosen, MOP Fellowship, meaning overphrase, intent before words. She smiled. A mop, a notebook, a code. Enough to clean a room far bigger than this one, the conversation of the world. A week after the session closed, Crystal Alnor moved in sync like a newly wound clock. The new manager walked through the lobby, greeting the cleaning crew first before acknowledging VIP guests. In the back hallway, Naomi Price taped up a handwritten flyer. Basic Arabic class. 30 minutes after shift, staff break room. Teacher, M. Carter, free. Underneath was a small mop icon. Ava Lynn smiled and sent a photo to Madison. It's begun. Madison returned to the UAE to finalize paperwork for her new role and to launch the MOP Fellowship, meaning overphrase, a small grant for hotel and service workers who want to learn a foreign language. The fund was modest. Scholarships from $500 to $2,000, enough to buy a dictionary, pay for an online course, or cover exam fees. The fund's introduction was written in 2 lines. 1. Work doesn't need a title. it needs time. 2. Where there is language, there is value. The MOP launch took place in a small meeting room. Adam Rahman stood in the corner filming on his phone. Monica hung the Respect First code beside the fund's banner. Sheikh Zaid sent a handwritten letter. Nia guides words. I support any initiative that puts intent before sound. Madison read it and bowed her head slightly. The same bow as always, even though more people knew her name now. At noon, she returned to Crystal Alnor for the quick after-shift class. The break room was cramped, scented faintly of laundry powder. Naomi, Tyler Fox, 2 housekeepers, a security guard, and a young chef sat in a semicircle. Madison drew 3 circles on the whiteboard: intent, words, face. Lesson 1, she said. Ask questions to find intent. For example, if a guest says, "Is it too noisy here?" they might really mean they're afraid they won't sleep before a big presentation tomorrow. Address the intent first. We have quiet rooms in the East Wing. Let me arrange one for you. The whole room nodded. Naomi raised her hand. And the pause beat? Count to 3 silently after any sentence that might touch pride. That way, you preserve their face and yours. Madison opened her notebook. Its cover worn, edges curled like bird wings. She read them an excerpt from OPEC meeting minutes. Places where choosing the right nuance had saved entire headlines. Tyler sat straighter, eyes more focused. Naomi scribbled furiously, QG. How to preserve a metaphor in translation, how to avoid excess weight. At the end, Madison placed the small metal mop on the table and told them about Ava, Mr. Harris, and Ms. Gomez back in Ohio. This is a symbol to remind us that labor shines too. Naomi cupped it in her palm, eyes damp. I'll keep it here for this room. Madison smiled. Keep it, and remember to mop up arrogance. The whole room laughed. A text from Aunt May came right on time. A photo of Mrs. Barakat taking her medicine at the correct dosage, smiling in her bright headscarf. Beneath it, Aunt May had typed, You've translated a whole household. Madison stared at the photo for a long time. She understood. Language can raise a tent big enough for a crowd, but it can also carry one person through a rainy night. In the afternoon, Grant Whitman emailed requesting a meeting. In the lounge, he looked out the window. Voice lowered. The contract from last time. I've amended the terms. Individual credit, veto rights, and the Respect First code in the appendix. He paused, then added quietly, I was wrong to call your story a fairy tale. Madison flipped through the document quickly, marking points with her pencil, then signed with the Nia fountain pen. Thank you for fixing the wording. Grant exhaled. The right words can sometimes save a person. More often than you think. That evening, Reuters ran a follow-up piece. From Respect First to the MOP Fund, how an interpreter reshaped energy reporting. The article wasn't sugar-coated. It counted pause beats, quoted exactly the 3 key phrases, and credited by name everyone who had tightened the language. Ethan, Leah, Briggs, Adam, Monica. Madison read and smiled, a room full of people. No one cut the line. Each carried bricks from where they stood. Late that night, she opened the last page of her notebook. In the left column, she wrote new vocabulary from 3 languages she was studying, jotted on the plane. A few lines of Swahili, advanced Spanish, and basic Turkish. In the right column, she wrote 3 reminders. 1. Intent outweighs words. 2. Saving face is the cheapest cost of reconciliation. 3. Skill needs no title. She closed the notebook, letting the weight of silence settle. The bedroom was dark. but the window frame drew a thin line of light. Her phone buzzed. Naomi sent a clip from class. Small laughter echoed, the silver mop catching the light like a star. Ava added, "More people are signing up for the after-shift class." Tyler reported that he'd written apology letters to those he used to tease in the parking lot. Ethan sent a photo of a press release with the phrasing correct. Adam texted a single Arabic word, Nia. Before bed, Madison wrote a short passage to be posted on the meeting room door at the next session. If you've ever been underestimated, judged too quickly, or placed in the wrong seat, you are not wrong, you are not small, you are seen. Put intent before words, then walk through the door. This room has space for you. She set down her pen, a small bow, to the mop, to the notebook, to the rooms she had walked through, and to the people who once turned away and then returned. Tomorrow, it would all begin again with one right sentence, because the world doesn't change through shouting. It changes through the right words, spoken at the right time with respect. And that's the journey from a mop to the international negotiating table, where intent always outweighs words and respect can change an entire room. What about you? If you were in Madison's place, would you choose silence or stand up to protect the true meaning? If this story inspired you, hit like, share to spread the message, and subscribe for more powerful stories to come.